My name is Morgan Reynolds, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me. Because when the people who claim to love you start demanding what's rightfully yours, it's not about family needs. It's about showing you exactly where you've always stood in their eyes. When my grandfather left me $680,000 in his will, my parents didn't congratulate me. They didn't ask how I felt about losing the only person who truly saw me. Instead, they called a family meeting where the only item on the agenda was how quickly I could sign it all away to my sister Heather. "It's what your grandfather would have wanted," they said, though his actual wishes were written in black and white with my name on them. I nodded and smiled that day. But what they didn't know was that I'd already made a decision that would change everything. Not just for me, but for the family that never thought I'd stand my ground. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I was 7 years old the first time I realized I was the family afterthought. It was Christmas morning, and the living room floor was covered in wrapping paper and ribbons. Heather, my older sister by 3 years, was surrounded by a mountain of gifts. A new bike with purple streamers, an expensive art set with real pastels, a portable CD player, and at least 6 other boxes I watched her tear through with squeals of delight. Me? I got 2 presents. A pack of socks with the clearance sticker still attached, and a board game we already owned that my parents had clearly pulled from the hall closet last minute and rewrapped. "Don't look so disappointed, Morgan," Mom said, noticing my face fall. "You're just easier to shop for. Heather has so many interests." That was the beginning of a pattern I'd spend the next 20 years trying to understand. Heather was vibrant, complex, artistic. I was convenient, the easy child. The one they never had to worry about, which somehow translated to the one they never had to consider. By high school, the dynamics were set in stone. Heather failed 3 classes her junior year, and my parents hired her a private tutor. I made honor roll every semester, and they forgot to attend the awards ceremony. Twice. When Heather decided she wanted to try horseback riding, my parents leased her a horse. When I joined the debate team and qualified for nationals, they complained about the cost of the bus ticket to get me there. "You're so self-sufficient," they'd say, like it was a compliment instead of an excuse for their neglect. The truth was, I had to be self-sufficient. No one was coming to save me, to champion me, to fight for what I deserved. So I worked harder, got scholarships, took extra shifts at the campus bookstore, and put myself through college while Heather dropped out of 3 different universities, each one more expensive than the last. It wasn't that they were cruel people. That might have been easier to understand. They just didn't see me. Not really. In their eyes, Heather was a brilliant but fragile flower who needed constant support, and I was a sturdy weed that could grow through concrete if necessary. They weren't wrong about my resilience, but they never questioned why I had to develop it in the first place. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandfather, Walter Reynolds. He was my dad's father, but nothing like him. Grandpa Walt had worked as a high school principal for 40 years, and he had an uncanny ability to notice the quiet students, the ones everyone else overlooked. I was his quiet student. Every Sunday afternoon during my childhood, he'd pick me up in his old Buick and take me fishing at Evergreen Lake. Just us. He never invited Heather, not because he didn't love her, but because he recognized that she got plenty of attention elsewhere. These were our hours. "You know why I like you, Morgan?" he asked me once when I was 12, as we sat watching our bobbers float on the still water. "You pay attention. Most people are so busy thinking about what they'll say next that they miss everything important happening around them. But not you. You notice things." It was the first time in my life someone had seen a quality in me worth admiring. Not my grades, not my achievements, just me. The way my mind worked. The person I was even when I wasn't accomplishing anything. After I graduated college, I got a job at a marketing firm in Seattle, putting a blessed 2,000 miles between me and my family in Ohio. I'd call home every few weeks, listen to the latest installment of The Heather Show from my mother, offer appropriate responses, and hang up feeling both relieved at the distance and sad that it was necessary. Heather was 28 now and still finding herself. This had involved 3 career changes, a brief marriage to a yoga instructor she met in Bali, and most recently, an expensive certification in holistic nutrition that my parents funded. Meanwhile, I was steadily climbing the ranks at my firm, had purchased a small but charming condo, and was dating Mason, a kind architectural engineer who treated me like I mattered. Grandpa Walt and I stayed close. He never got the hang of texting, but he'd send me actual letters, written in his shaky but determined handwriting. He'd share small-town gossip, fishing reports from our old lake, and always, words that made me feel worthy. Proud of you, Morgan, he'd write, building your life brick by brick. That's the right way to do it. No shortcuts, no handouts. You'll have something solid when you're done. When I got the call that he'd had a stroke, I was on a plane within hours. I spent 2 weeks by his hospital bed, reading him the sports pages, adjusting his pillows, and advocating fiercely with the hospital staff when his care didn't meet my standards. My parents visited for exactly 45 minutes. Heather sent flowers but was too emotionally fragile to see him in that condition. He recovered enough to return home, though he was never quite the same. I flew back to see him every 2 months, hired a part-time caregiver with my own money, and made sure he had everything he needed. My parents checked in occasionally. Heather never did. When he passed away 6 months later, I felt like someone had ripped a load-bearing wall from the structure of my life. At the funeral, I sat stone-faced in the front row, unable to reconcile the closed casket with the man who had taught me to bait a hook and value myself. My parents stood stoically beside me. Heather sobbed dramatically despite having visited him exactly 0 times during his illness. 3 days later, we gathered in the wood-paneled office of Grandpa. Walt's attorney, Mr. Donovan. He was a small man with thick glasses and a precise way of speaking that reminded me of my grandfather. Walter's will is straightforward, Mr. Donovan said, adjusting his glasses. His house and car are to be sold, and after some modest donations to his church and the local library, the bulk of his estate, approximately $680,000, is to be given to his granddaughter, Morgan Reynolds. The silence in the room was absolute. I stared at Mr. Donovan, certain I'd misheard. Then my mother cleared her throat. There must be some mistake, she said. Walt would have wanted the inheritance split between both his grandchildren. Mr. Donovan shook his head. There's no mistake, Mrs. Reynolds. Walter was very clear about his wishes. He made this will 3 years ago and reviewed it just 4 months before his passing. He left a personal letter for Morgan that explains his decision. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's handwriting. I took it with trembling fingers, aware of my family's eyes burning into me. The ride home was silent. My father gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. My mother stared out the window, lips pressed into a thin line. Heather texted furiously in the back seat beside me, undoubtedly spreading the news of this perceived injustice to her wide circle of friends. I clutched the unopened letter in my purse, afraid to read it in front of them, afraid of what it might reveal about Grandpa's choice, and about how he really saw our family. As soon as we pulled into the driveway of my parents' house, my father turned off the engine and said, "Family meeting. Kitchen table, now." Their tactic was immediate and transparent. No time to process, no space to think. They wanted me rattled, confused, and acquiescent. As I followed them inside, I already knew what was coming. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I could nod and smile my way through it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The kitchen table had always been the site of family decisions, though decisions was a generous term for what typically happened there. It was more like a courtroom where the verdict had been decided long before the trial began. My mother pulled out fresh coffee mugs while my father settled heavily into his usual chair at the head of the table. Heather positioned herself directly across from me, eyes red-rimmed but calculating. I recognized that look. It was the same one she'd worn when she convinced our parents to give her my college fund for her life-changing trip to Europe after high school. A trip that resulted in nothing but expensive souvenirs and a boyfriend who disappeared as soon as they returned stateside. "Morgan," my father began, voice measured in that way that meant he was working hard to control it. "We need to discuss what just happened." I nodded, fingering the unopened letter in my lap. Part of me wanted to tear it open right there, to hear Grandpa Walt's voice one more time before they tried to drown it out with their demands. But another part wanted to keep it private, safe from their twisting interpretations. "Grandpa left me his estate," I said simply. No apology, no justification. My mother's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. "Yes, and clearly there's been some misunderstanding. Your grandfather loved both his grandchildren equally." "Apparently not," muttered Heather. "That's enough," my father snapped at her before turning back to me. "Morgan, your sister is going through a difficult time right now. Her business is just getting off the ground, and she has the loan for her wellness center coming due." Ah yes, the wellness center. Heather's latest passion project, an upscale holistic health spa that my parents had already sunk $50,000 into, despite having zero evidence it would succeed where her previous ventures had failed. "The timing of this inheritance is providential," my mother added, leaning forward. "It's exactly what Heather needs to secure her future." I looked at my sister, who was now examining her manicure with great interest. "And what about my future?" My father waved his hand dismissively. "You're doing fine, Morgan. You've always been sensible with money. You have that good job in Seattle, that condo. You don't need this windfall the way your sister does." There it was. The same twisted logic that had defined my entire life. My competence was not something to be rewarded, but punished. My stability was not something to be celebrated but exploited. So because I worked hard and made responsible choices, I deserve less? The words were out before I could stop them, sharper than I'd intended. My mother looked startled. I rarely pushed back. "That's not what your father is saying. It's exactly what he's saying," I replied, surprising myself with my steady voice. "It's what you've both been saying my entire life. Heather needs more, so Morgan gets less." Heather rolled her eyes. "Oh, please don't start with the victim routine. You know, Grandpa only left you the money because you brown-nosed him those last few months, taking him to appointments, calling all the time." "I took care of him because I loved him," I said, heat rising in my cheeks. "Where were you when he needed someone to sort his medications or make sure he was eating properly?" "I was building a business. Some of us are trying to create something meaningful instead of just pushing papers at some soulless corporation." My father raised his hands. "Let's not get sidetracked. The point is, Morgan, this inheritance needs to benefit the whole family. We're thinking 2/3 to Heather for her immediate needs, and you can keep the rest." 2/3? I echoed, genuinely shocked. "You don't even want it split evenly?" "Heather needs at least $450,000 to clear her debts and properly launch the wellness center," my mother explained, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "You can put your share toward a house down payment someday." I looked at each of their faces in turn. My father's stern expectation, my mother's practiced concern, Heather's barely concealed entitlement. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what I had been trying not to see for years. I was not a daughter to them. I was a resource. "I need to read Grandpa's letter," I said quietly. My mother reached across the table as if to take it from me. "Why don't we discuss this first?" I pulled back, clutching the envelope to my chest. No, this is for me. Something in my tone must have surprised them because they all went silent. I stood up and walked to the back porch, closing the door firmly behind me. My hands trembled as I carefully opened the sealed envelope and unfolded the single page inside. Dear Morgan, if you're reading this, then I've gone fishing in bigger waters, and Mr. Donovan has told you about my decision. I imagine your parents aren't too happy about it. They never did understand value the way you and I do. You might be wondering why I left everything to you. It's simple, really. You were there. Not just at the end when I was sick, though I appreciate that more than, you were there all along, watching, listening, caring. You saw me as a person, not just a means to an end. I've watched how they treat you, Morgan. How they take your strength for granted. How they've always favored your sister, not because she deserves it, but because she demands it. They think they're helping her, but they've only taught her that she doesn't have to try. I could have split my money between you, but it wouldn't have been fair to either of you. Heather needs to learn that the world doesn't owe her anything. And you, my quiet, watchful granddaughter, need to learn that being dependable doesn't mean you deserve less. Sometimes it means you deserve more. This money is yours, not your parents', not your sister's, yours. Use it to build the life you want, not the one they think you should have. And remember what I taught you about fishing. Sometimes you have to let them tire themselves out fighting before they realize you've got the stronger line. I love you, kiddo. Don't let them reel you in. Grandpa Walti pressed the letter to my heart, tears streaming down my face. Even from beyond, he saw me. He understood. For the first time in my life, someone had put me first. Not because I demanded it, but because they believed I deserved it. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath before returning to the kitchen. They all looked up expectantly. Well? My mother prompted. What did it say? I carefully refolded the letter and tucked it into my pocket. It's private. Heather scoffed. Of course it is. Probably full of lies about us to justify cutting me out. Morgan, my father said, leaning forward, we're a family. We need to make this decision together. You know your grandfather wasn't thinking clearly in those final months. That was a new low, even for them. He was perfectly lucid, I said. And this isn't a family decision. It's my inheritance. My mother's face softened into the persuasive expression she used when trying to extract favors. Sweetie, we're not saying you shouldn't get anything, but your sister has immediate needs that— I have needs too, I interrupted. I've always had needs. The difference is I've never expected everyone else to fulfill them for me. Heather stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is so typical. You've always been jealous of me. Now you finally have a chance to get back at me, and you're loving it. Get back at you? I said incredulously. Heather, this isn't about you. For once in my life, something is actually about me. So you're just going to keep all the money for yourself? My father demanded. After everything we've done for you? The question hung in the air, and I found myself mentally cataloging exactly what they had done for me. Forgotten birthdays, missed graduations, repurposed college funds, years of being the afterthought, the reliable one, the one who would understand why Heather always came first. I need time to think, I said finally. It wasn't what I wanted to say, but it was the only thing that would get me out of that kitchen with my sanity intact. My father's face darkened. There's nothing to think about. Your sister needs this money. The wellness center opens in 3 months, and the final payment to the contractors is due next week. Of course, there was a deadline. There was always a deadline with Heather's projects. Always a crisis that required immediate financial intervention. I'm going for a walk, I said, standing up. We can talk more later. Morgan Catherine Reynolds, you sit back down right now, my mother ordered. We are resolving this today. I paused at the doorway, one hand on the frame. No, Mom, we're not. As I stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, my phone buzzed with a text from Mason. How did it go? Are you okay? I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. The truth was, I didn't know if I was okay. I felt simultaneously powerful and terrified, justified and guilty. For the first time in my life, I had something my family wanted, needed, and couldn't take without my permission. I texted back, still figuring it out. I'll call you tonight. Then I walked toward the old neighborhood park, Grandpa Walt's letter a reassuring weight in my pocket, and considered what it might feel like to finally put myself first. The playground at Oakwood Park hadn't changed much since I was a child. The same faded blue slide, the same creaking swing set that had hosted 1,000 childhood dreams. I sat on one of the swings, gently pushing myself back and forth with the toe of my shoe, and tried to sort through the tangle of emotions choking me. Guilt was there, of course. It had been my constant companion for as long as I could remember. The guilt of having needs, the guilt of wanting recognition, the guilt of secretly wishing just once that my parents would look at me the way they looked at Heather. But there was something else, too. Something unfamiliar and almost frightening in its intensity. Anger. Not the fleeting frustration I'd felt 100 times before, but something deeper and more righteous. The kind of anger that didn't apologize for existing. I pulled out Grandpa, Walt's letter again, reading it through tear-blurred eyes. You need to learn that being dependable doesn't mean you deserve less. Sometimes it means you deserve more. My phone buzzed again. 3 texts from my mother in quick succession. Where are you? We're still waiting. Your sister is very upset. Of course she was. Heather's emotional state had always been the family barometer. If Heather was upset, the household was in crisis. If Heather was happy, all was well. My feelings were irrelevant footnotes to the main story. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Mason. Hey, he answered on the first ring. How's it going? Just hearing his voice, steady, concerned, genuinely interested in my answer, made something loosen in my chest. Not great, I admitted. They want me to give most of the inheritance to Heather for her latest business venture. Most of it? Like, how much are we talking? 2/3. Around $450,000. Mason was silent for a moment. Wow, that's a lot of money. I know. And this is for the wellness center thing? The one she's been posting about on Instagram with all the crystals and sound baths? Despite everything, I laughed. Mason had only met Heather once at Thanksgiving last year, but he'd gotten her measure remarkably quickly. That's the one. Apparently, they've already committed to contractors and payments are due. Without knowing if they had the money? That's classic. Heather, I finished for him. Sign first, figure out payment later. Someone always bails her out. And that someone is usually you? I closed my eyes. Not usually for financial stuff. That's been my parents. But in other ways, yeah, I'm the safety net. The one who makes the travel arrangements when she's stranded in Miami with a maxed-out credit card. The one who drives 3 hours to pick her up when her car breaks down because she never bothered to get Taoiue despite my reminders. And now they expect you to be her financial safety net, too. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Grandpa left me a letter. He knew this would happen. He knew they would try to take it from me. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I? Morgan the reliable, Morgan the understanding, Morgan the eternally accommodating, going to do when finally confronted with a choice that could change everything? I don't know yet, I said honestly. Part of me wants to tell them no and walk away. But another part is afraid of losing them, Mason finished gently. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. Is that stupid? After everything, is it stupid that I still care what they think? It's not stupid, Morgan. They're your family. You've spent your whole life trying to earn their approval. That doesn't just disappear overnight. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. But what if this is my only chance? What if this money is the only thing I'll ever have that makes them see me as valuable? Mason's voice turned fierce. You are valuable without a single penny of that inheritance. And if they can't see that, then maybe this is about more than just money. Maybe this is about whether they deserve to have you in their lives at all. His words hit me like a physical blow because buried in them was a truth I'd been avoiding. For years, my relationship with my family wasn't just unequal, it was unhealthy. And no amount of money, given or withheld, was going to fix that. I need to think, I said finally. I'll catch a rideshare back to the hotel tonight. I can't stay at their house like I planned. Good call. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. You know that, right? I know, I said, and for the first time that day I felt something close to peace. I'll call you tomorrow. After hanging up, I sat on that swing until the sun began to set, watching families come and go from the park. Parents pushing toddlers on swings, teenagers shooting hoops at the basketball court, a father teaching his daughter to ride a bike without training wheels. Normal families doing normal things, no power plays or guilt trips in sight. When I finally checked my phone again, I had 8 missed calls and a slew of texts. I scrolled through them mechanically. From Mom. This is very disrespectful, Morgan. We're a family. We solve problems together. From Dad. You need to come home now. Your mother is beside herself. From Heather. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I need this money. My whole future depends on it. From Heather again. You've always been jealous of me. This proves it. From Mom again. If your grandfather could see how you're tearing this family apart, he'd be ashamed. That last one stung. A precision strike at my most vulnerable point. Would Grandpa Walt be ashamed of me? Was I being selfish? Took out his letter once more, running my fingers over his familiar handwriting. This money is yours, not your parents', not your sister's, yours. No, he wouldn't be ashamed. He'd given me this inheritance precisely because he knew they would try to take it, and he wanted me, just once, to have something that was completely mine. Back at the hotel that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, weighing my options. I could give in, as I always had. Smile and nod and hand over what was mine in exchange for momentary peace and the fleeting illusion of familial love. I could compromise, offer to split the money evenly, which would still leave Heather short of what she needed, but might appease my parents, or I could say no. Simply, clearly, finally say no. The thought made my heart race with both terror and something close to exhilaration. In the morning, I showered, put on my most professional outfit, a navy blue pantsuit I wore to important client presentations, and walked to the local bank. I'd made a decision during those sleepless hours, and the first step was understanding exactly what I was working with. Mr. Donovan, Grandpa's lawyer, had explained that the estate would be settled within 2 weeks. The house had already sold. The car was in the process of being sold, and once all the accounts were liquidated, the money would be transferred to me. I needed a plan before that happened. The bank manager, Mrs. Townsend, was a brisk woman with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She listened attentively as I explained my situation, tactfully omitting the family drama and focusing on the practical aspects. So, you'll be receiving a substantial inheritance, and you want to discuss your options, she summarized. Yes. I want to be smart about this. It's important to me that I handle it responsibly. 2 hours later, I left the bank with a folder full of information about investment options, retirement accounts, and first-time homebuyer programs. I had a preliminary plan, one that would honor Grandpa Walt's gift while securing my own future. My phone rang as I stepped onto the sidewalk. Dad again. I took a deep breath and answered. Morgan, where are you? We expected you back hours ago. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I'm not coming back to the house, Dad. I'm staying at the Parkview Hotel downtown. This is ridiculous. We have things to discuss. I know, and we will. But I need some time and space to make my decision. What decision? There is no decision here. Your sister needs... I know what Heather needs, I interrupted, surprising both of us. What I don't know is what you think I need. The silence on the other end was deafening. Had anyone in my family ever considered what I needed? Had I? Morgan? He said finally, his voice switching to the reasonable, patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. We've always done what's best for both our daughters. The laugh that escaped me was genuine, if a bit bitter. That's not true, Dad. And I think you know it. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not signing anything over to anyone until I've had time to think. I'll meet with you tomorrow at the coffee shop on Main Street, 10 a.m. We can talk then. Now you listen here. Tomorrow, Dad, 10 a.m. And then I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. I hung up on my father. My hands were shaking. As I slipped the phone back into my purse, but there was also an unfamiliar lightness in my chest. I had drawn a boundary, a small one, just the beginning of what needed to be built. But it was a start. That night, I ordered room service, opened my laptop, and began to make a list. Not of what my family wanted from me, but of what I wanted for myself. It was harder than it should have been. After years of subsuming my desires to keep the peace, I struggled to articulate what I actually wanted. But slowly, the list grew. A home of my own, not just a condo, but a house with a yard where I could plant a garden. Security for retirement. Funds to pursue the freelance marketing business I'd been dreaming about that would let me work with small, ethical companies. Instead of the corporate giants that dominated my current portfolio, maybe even enough to take a proper vacation, not a business trip with a day of sightseeing tacked on, but a real restorative break. As I wrote, my vision for the future became clearer, more concrete. This wasn't just about money. It was about claiming my right to want things, to have plans, to put myself at the center of my own life story. Tomorrow would be hard. They would push and plead and manipulate. But tonight, I was building my resolve one line item at a time, constructing a future that was truly mine. The Copper Kettle Coffee Shop on Main Street had been a town fixture since before I was born. The same chipped mugs, the same creaky wooden floors, the same cinnamon rolls that were somehow both too sweet and absolutely perfect. I arrived 20 minutes early, chose a corner table with a clear view of the door, and ordered a large black coffee that I didn't touch. At 9:58, they walked in, all three of them. I should have expected that. My parents never fought fair. Mother spotted me first. She swept across the room, designer purse swinging, and slid into the chair across from me. My father followed, his expression a carefully constructed mask of disappointment. Heather trailed behind, oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes even inside the dimly lit cafe. You've put us through quite the ordeal, my mother began without preamble. We've been worried sick. I resisted the urge to point out that I'd told them exactly where I was. That I was a 32-year-old adult woman, not a runaway teenager. That their worry only materialized when I stopped following the script. I needed some time to think, I said instead, keeping my voice level. About what? Heather asked finally, removing her sunglasses to reveal red-rimmed eyes. About how you're going to ruin everything I've worked for? I almost laughed. Worked for was a generous description for a business built entirely on our parents' money and connections. My father signaled the waitress. 4 coffees, please, and some of those cinnamon rolls. Just the coffees, I corrected. This isn't going to be a long conversation. The confidence in my voice surprised even me. Where was this coming from? This sudden strength? I thought of Grandpa Walt's fishing metaphor, letting them tire themselves out fighting before they realized I had the stronger line. "Morgan," my mother said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I pulled back before she could touch me. Her eyes widened in hurt surprise, and for a brief moment, I felt a familiar stab of guilt. But I pushed it away. "I've made my decision." "About the inheritance?" I said. They all leaned forward, expectant. My father's expression softened, already assuming victory. "I'm not giving the money to Heather." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient cafe noise seemed to dim. "What?" Heather finally managed, her voice rising. "You can't be serious?" "I'm completely serious." My father's face darkened. "Morgan, be reasonable. Your sister's wellness center is not my responsibility," I finished. "Grandpa Walt left this money to me for a reason. I'm honoring his wishes." "This is so selfish," Heather spat, tears welling in her eyes. "You know I need this. The contractors are already halfway through the renovations." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt a strange new emotion. Pity. She was 35 years old and had never once faced the consequences of her actions. Every failure had been cushioned, every mistake erased, every bill paid by someone else. In trying to protect her, our parents had crippled her. "Why did you commit to renovations without having the money to pay for them?" I asked quietly. Her mouth opened and closed. I thought... You thought Mom and Dad would cover it. Or that I would. Like always. My mother's expression had shifted from hurt to calculation. "Morgan, sweetie, we understand you're upset. You feel overlooked. This is your way of making a point. But there are better ways to address those feelings than punishing your sister." Classic mom, reframing my boundary as emotional manipulation, while completely missing the actual issue. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm making a decision about my own inheritance, after everything we've done for you," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is how you repay us?" There it was again. That suggestion that I owed them, that my whole existence was a debt to be repaid. "What exactly have you done for me, Dad?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Help me understand what I'm being so ungrateful for." My father blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "We raised you, put a roof over your head, clothes on your back. The basic legal requirements of parenthood," I noted. "What else?" My mother jumped in. "We supported your education." "No, you didn't. Grandpa Walt helped with part of my tuition until you redirected my college fund to Heather's Europe trip. I worked 30 hours a week during school and took out loans for the rest. I paid off the last of those loans 2 years ago." "We always encouraged your independence," my father said, as if this were a virtue rather than a necessity. "You encouraged my independence because it was convenient for you, because it meant you could focus all your energy, time, and resources on Heather." Heather made a choked sound. "That's not fair." I turned to her. "Isn't it? Name one major life event of mine that wasn't overshadowed by your needs. My high school graduation that Mom and Dad missed because you had a fender bender? My college acceptance dinner they canceled because you broke up with your boyfriend? The promotion celebration they left early because you called with another crisis?" The waitress arrived with our coffees, glanced at our tense faces, and wisely retreated without a word. "So this is revenge," my mother said, her voice hardening. "You're punishing Heather for our shortcomings as parents." I shook my head. "This isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about me finally putting myself first for once. Grandpa Walt left me this money because he wanted me to build a life for myself, not to solve Heather's problems or earn your approval." "And what exactly do you plan to do with all this money?" my father demanded. "Blow it on frivolous things while your sister's dream collapses?" "No," I said. I've been meeting with financial advisors. I'm going to invest most of it, buy a house, and set aside some to start my own marketing consultancy focusing on small businesses and nonprofits. The detail in my answer seemed to throw them. They'd expected either capitulation or rebellion, not a thoughtful, adult plan. "That all sounds very nice for you," my mother said, her tone making it clear she thought it was anything but. "Meanwhile, your sister will lose everything she's worked for." I looked at Heather. "Have you considered scaling back, starting smaller, proving the concept works before expanding?" "It wouldn't be the same," she muttered. "The whole point is that it's exclusive, high-end." Of course it was. Heather had never believed in starting small. Every venture had to be grand, impressive, Instagram-worthy from day one. "I have a compromise," I said after a moment. "I'll loan you $100,000 for the wellness center, with a formal contract, repayment schedule, and business plan reviewed by an independent financial advisor." My father scoffed. "A loan? To your own sister?" "Yes." "A business loan for a business. That's generous, considering the track record of Heather's previous ventures." "I don't need your charity," Heather snapped, though her eyes had lit up at the mention of $100,000. "It's not charity. It's an investment, one I'm willing to make if you're serious about this business. But I need to know you're committed enough to make it work and pay back the loan." My mother shook her head. "This is ridiculous. We're family. We don't need contracts and repayment schedules." "Actually, we do. Because family has so far meant that I give and give while receiving nothing in return. That stops now." My father pushed his untouched coffee away and stood up abruptly. "I don't recognize you anymore, Morgan. This isn't how we raised you to behave." I met his gaze steadily. "You raised me to accommodate Heather's needs at the expense of my own. You raised me to believe my worth came from what I could provide for others. Grandpa Walt was the only one who taught me that I matter just as I am." "Walt was a bitter old man who played favorites," my mother said, her voice cold. "He did this deliberately to cause problems in our family." The casual cruelty of her words about the man who had just died, the man who had been more of a parent to me than either of them, made something snap inside me. "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" My mother looked genuinely shocked. "Get out! Leave! This conversation is over." "Morgan," my father started. "No, you don't get to insult Grandpa Walt and then expect me to hand over his money. The offer of a $100,000 loan stands. Take it or leave it. Either way, I'm done discussing." "This!" Heather stood up, tears streaming down her face. "You've always hated me. Admit it." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The designer clothes bought with our parents' credit cards, the professionally highlighted hair, the manicured nails and expertly applied makeup that created an illusion of effortless perfection. She was beautiful, yes, but also empty somehow. A vessel filled with entitlement rather than purpose. "I don't hate you, Heather. I feel sorry for you. Because someday Mom and Dad won't be able to bail you out anymore, and you'll have no idea how to stand on your own." "How dare you speak to your sister that way?" my mother hissed, gathering her purse. "My offer stands until the end of the week," I said calmly. "After that, I move forward with my own plans." They left in a flurry of pushed chairs and muttered accusations, Heather's sobs providing the soundtrack to their exit. I sat alone at the table, hands trembling slightly but mind remarkably clear. I'd expected to feel devastated after this confrontation. Instead, I felt lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't actually part of me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "How did it go?" I typed back. I stood my ground. "They didn't take it well." His response came immediately. "Proud of you." "Want me to call?" I smiled at the screen. "Not yet. I'm okay." Actually, I'm better than okay, and it was true. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defining myself in relation to my family's needs or expectations. I was just Morgan, imperfect, still figuring things out, but finally steering my own ship. I paid for the untouched coffees, left a generous tip for the waitress who'd witnessed our family drama, and walked out into the bright morning. Sunlight. There would be more fallout, I knew. My parents wouldn't give up easily. But I had drawn my line in the sand, and for once, I wasn't going to erase it to make someone else's path smoother. I returned to Seattle 3 days later, the inheritance situation still unresolved, but my resolve stronger than ever. Heather hadn't responded to my loan offer, and my parents' only communication had been a terse text from my mother. "We're very disappointed in your behavior. We raised you better than this." I'd read it once, then turned off my phone for the remainder of the flight. There was a time when those words would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. Now they just felt like a last, desperate attempt to regain control. Mason picked me up from the airport, his tall frame easy to spot as I exited the terminal. The moment I saw him, something loosened in my chest. Here was someone who saw me, really saw me, and liked what he saw. "Welcome home," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like cedar and coffee. "Thanks for coming to get me. You kidding? Wild horses couldn't have kept me away." He took my bag with one hand and laced his fingers through mine with the other. "How are you feeling?" I considered the question as we walked toward the parking garage. Strangely calm, like I've finally stopped holding my breath. In the car, I filled him in on the aftermath of the coffee shop confrontation, how I'd extended the loan offer formally via email, how I'd met again with Mr. Donovan to finalize the inheritance details, how I'd spent my last night in town, at Grandpa Walt's now empty house rather than reaching out to my parents again. I kept expecting to feel guilty or anxious, I admitted as we merged onto the highway. But mostly I just feel resolved. Mason glanced at me, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe because you're finally honoring what you actually want instead of what they expect you to want." "Maybe," I agreed. It's still strange, though. They've been the center of my emotional universe for so long. Even when I moved across the country, I was still orbiting around their approval. And now, I watched the familiar Seattle skyline emerge through the windshield. Now I'm building my own center. That night, after unpacking and catching up on work emails, I sat at my small dining table with a notepad, mapping out concrete next steps. The money would be transferred to my account within days. I needed to be ready. Step 1. Set up a meeting with a certified financial planner, someone with no connection to my family, someone who would treat this as my money, not a family resource, to be distributed. Step 2. Research neighborhoods for potential homes. Something modest, but with room for a garden. Maybe the Green Lake area or Columbia City. Step 3. Draft a business plan for the marketing consultancy. I already had a small roster of clients I'd been helping on the side. This could be my chance to take that work full-time. The practical focus kept me anchored when, later that night, my phone lit up with Heather's name. I stared at it for 3 full rings before answering. "Hello?" "I've been thinking about your offer," she said without preamble. Her voice had that honeyed quality it took on when she wanted something, a tone I'd heard her use on boyfriends, professors, and police officers who'd pulled her over for speeding. "The business loan?" I clarified, keeping my own voice neutral. "Yes, I think I could make that work. But $100,000 isn't quite enough for what we need. The contractor says we're looking at closer to $150,000 to finish everything according to the original plans." Of course, I should have seen this coming. My offer wasn't being accepted, it was being negotiated upward. The offer was $100,000, Heather. "I know. But if you could just stretch a little more?" She paused, then added with calculated vulnerability. "This means everything to me, Morgan. It's the first thing I've ever really believed in. just like she'd believed in the artisanal candle business 2 years ago, and the photography studio the year before that, and the boutique clothing line before that. Each venture launched with enthusiasm and abandoned once the initial excitement wore off. If you truly believe in it, then you'll find a way to make it work with $100,000, I said, or scale back the plans to match the budget. Why are you being so rigid about this? It's not like you need all that money right away. It's not about need, it's about boundaries. She made a frustrated noise. Boundaries. You've been seeing that therapist again, haven't you? All this talk about boundaries and self-care. It's just fancy words for selfishness. I let the accusation hang in the air for a moment, then said quietly, "Is that really what you think? That taking care of myself is selfish? When it comes at the expense of your family?" "Yes." "And what about when your needs come at the expense of mine? Is that selfish too?" She didn't answer immediately. I could almost hear her searching for a way to frame this that maintained her position as the wronged party. "That's different," she finally said. "I'm in a crisis. My entire future depends on this wellness center." Your entire future has depended on a lot of things over the years, Heather. The clothing boutique, the photography studio, the candle business. What makes this different? I've grown up. I've changed. This is my passion. In her voice, I heard the echo of 1,000 promises. This time will be different. This time I'll follow through. This time is special. And beneath those promises, the unspoken expectation. And you'll be there to catch me if I fall, right? Like always. "My offer stands," I said firmly. $100,000 as a business loan with proper terms and conditions. If you're serious about this venture, that should be enough to get you started, even if you need to modify your original vision. She was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, in a small voice that sounded more genuine than anything I'd heard from her in years, she asked, "Do you really think I can do this?" The question caught me off guard. Not "why are you being so mean?" or "how can you do this to me?" but a sincere question about her own capabilities. Honestly, I don't know, Heather. You've never stuck with anything long enough to find out. But I'd like to see you try. Really try. Without the safety net of knowing someone will bail you out if it gets hard. "I'm scared," she admitted. And for the first time in our adult lives, I felt like I was talking to my actual sister, not the persona she'd constructed. "Starting something new is scary," I acknowledged. "But it's also exciting. And you'll never know what you're capable of if Mom and Dad always swoop in to fix things. They're furious with you, you know." "I know. Dad says you've betrayed the family." I almost laughed. "By not giving away an inheritance that was specifically left to me? That's an interesting definition of betrayal." "Mom says Grandpa Walt was playing favorites, trying to cause problems between us even after he's gone." The familiar anger flared, but I tamped it down. Grandpa Walt was the only one who ever treated us as individuals, not as the golden child and the reliable backup. If that's playing favorites, then maybe favorites needed to be played. Heather was quiet again. Then, "I'll think about the loan offer." "Take your time, but the offer expires at the end of the week, as I said." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone, turning the conversation over in my mind. It was the most honest exchange Heather and I had had in years, maybe ever. No melodrama, no tears, no accusations, just two adults discussing a business proposition, and, beneath that, the dysfunctional family dynamics that had shaped both our lives. I texted Mason. Just had an almost normal conversation with Heather, feeling weirdly hopeful. His reply came quickly. "Progress. Dinner to celebrate?" "Yes, please. My place in an hour?" I spent the next day at work catching up on projects I'd neglected during my trip home. My mind kept wandering to the inheritance, to the possibilities it represented. Not just financial freedom, but a new kind of emotional freedom. The freedom to make choices based on what I wanted, not what would cause the least disruption. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Your father and I have discussed the situation. We're willing to accept your loan offer on Heather's behalf. Please transfer the funds by Friday. I stared at the message, a mixture of disbelief and indignation washing over me. They were accepting my offer on Heather's behalf? As if she were a child who couldn't make her own decisions? As if the loan were being extended to them rather than to her business? I typed back. The offer was made to Heather for her business. If she wants to accept it, she needs to contact me directly to discuss terms. The reply came instantly. Don't be difficult, Morgan. We're trying to help resolve this situation amicably. Amicably, in my family, had always meant in a way that requires Morgan to compromise while everyone else gets what they want. Not this time. This isn't your decision to make, Mom. If Heather wants the loan, she can call me herself. I turned my phone to silent and went back to my work presentation. 20 minutes later, I checked it to find 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from my father. Your mother is very upset. Call her immediately. The old guilt stirred, that habitual response to the knowledge that I had upset someone in my family, particularly my mother. But alongside it was a new feeling, resentment. Why was my mother's upset more important than mine? Why was it always my responsibility to smooth things over? I didn't call. Instead, I emailed Heather directly. If you're interested in discussing the loan terms for your wellness center, let me know. This needs to be between us, not filtered through Mom and Dad. That evening, instead of obsessively checking my phone for family messages, I met my friend Tara for happy hour at our favorite tapas place on Capitol Hill. I hadn't seen her since before Grandpa Walt's funeral, and the normalcy of catching up over patatas bravas and sangria was exactly what I needed. So you really stood up to them? She asked, eyebrows raised in impressed surprise. Tara had heard plenty about my family dynamics over the years. The Morgan Reynolds I know would have handed over the money with an apology for existing. I winced at the accuracy of her assessment. I surprised myself, honestly. But once I started standing my ground, it got easier. And now Heather might actually accept a loan instead of a handout? That's growth for both of you. Maybe. If she can break free from my parents' influence long enough to make her own decision. Tara raised her glass. To boundaries and bank accounts. May both of yours remain intact. I clinked my glass against hers, smiling. I'll drink to that. When I checked my phone later that night, there was an email from Heather. I want to discuss the loan. No Mom and Dad involved. Can we video call tomorrow? For the first time since Grandpa Walt's death, I felt a glimmer of hope that something positive might emerge from this mess. Not just financial independence for me, but maybe, just maybe, a healthier relationship with my sister. I typed back a quick response. 7 p.m. my time works. Looking forward to it. Whether this was a genuine step toward a more mature relationship, or just another manipulation tactic remained to be seen. But I was ready either way, to extend a hand if she truly wanted to stand on her own, or to maintain my boundaries if this was just another attempt to wear me down. The ground beneath me felt solid in a way it never had before. Whatever happened next, I knew that I wouldn't lose myself in the process. The video call with Heather was scheduled for 7 p.m., but I started preparing mentally hours before. I cleaned my apartment, changed outfits twice, and practiced what I wanted to say in the mirror like I was getting ready for a job interview instead of a conversation with my own sister. Keep it professional, I reminded myself. This is a business discussion, not a family therapy session. At 6:58, I settled at my dining table with my laptop, a notepad, and a glass of water. I'd drafted a simple loan agreement outlining the terms, $100,000 at a below-market interest rate, payable over 5 years, with the first payment due 6 months after disbursement to give her business time to start generating revenue. At exactly 7 tau, my screen lit up with Heather's incoming call. I took a deep breath and clicked accept. Her face filled my screen, perfectly made up as always, but with shadows under her eyes that her concealer couldn't quite hide. "Hey," she said, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Hey yourself," I replied. "How are things?" She shrugged one shoulder. "Complicated. The contractor's threatening to walk off the job if he doesn't get paid by next Friday. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Dad's talking about taking out a second mortgage on their house." My stomach tightened. He shouldn't do that. That's what I told them, but... She trailed off, then looked directly at the camera for the first time. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I need to try without a safety net." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Was this genuine self-awareness or another manipulation tactic? "I want to accept your loan offer," she continued. "The original amount, $100,000. I've been going over the plans with the designer, and we've found ways to cut costs without compromising the core vision." I blinked in surprise. This was not the conversation I'd been bracing for. "That's good thinking," I said cautiously. "I know we need to have a formal agreement," she went on. I brought a notepad to write down the terms. She held up a spiral-bound notebook, the kind she used to doodle in during high school classes while I took detailed notes that she'd later borrow. For the next 30 minutes, we discussed the loan terms like actual adults, interest rates, payment schedules, what would happen in case of default. I explained that I'd need to see a proper business plan before finalizing anything. She agreed without argument. "I've been working on one," she said, surprising me again. "It's not perfect, but I can email it to you tonight." As the business portion of our conversation wound down, an awkward silence fell between us. There was an elephant in the room. The lifetime of family dynamics that had led us to this strange place where I was becoming my sister's banker rather than her enabler. "Mom and Dad are still really upset," Heather finally said, picking at the edge of her notepad. "Dad says you've changed." "I have changed," I acknowledged, "but maybe not in the way he means. They think that friend of yours has turned you against the family, the guy you're dating." I couldn't help but laugh. "Mason, he's hardly brainwashed me. He's just the first person who's ever encouraged me to value myself as much as I value everyone else." Heather was quiet for a moment, studying me through the screen. "You seem different, not just standing up to Mom and Dad, but, I don't know, more solid somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I'm finally figuring out who I am outside of what our family needs from me." She nodded slowly. "I get that. Sometimes I feel like I don't know who I am outside of being the family screw-up." The candor in her voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the Heather I knew. The one who deflected. Vulnerability with drama, who turned every conversation about accountability into a testament to her victimhood. "You're not a screw-up," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "You're just someone who's never had to face consequences." "Thanks a lot," she muttered, but there was no real heat behind it. I didn't mean it as an insult, just an observation. "Do you ever wonder who you might have been if Mom and Dad hadn't rushed in to fix everything for you?" She looked away from the screen. "Sometimes, especially lately." She hesitated, then added, "I saw your college roommate at a wedding last month. Rebecca? She said you worked 30 hours a week while taking a full course load. I didn't know that." "Oh." I wasn't sure what to say. "Yeah, it was pretty rough that first year after the college fund went to your Europe trip." "I didn't know that either," she said quietly. "That my trip came from your college fund. Mom just said they'd found the money." I stared at her. "You honestly didn't know?" She shook her head. "I mean, I knew they helped with money all the time, but they never really explained where it came from. I just assumed—" She trailed off, her expression troubled. "That there was an endless supply?" I suggested. "Something like that." She laughed without humor. Stupid, right? For the first time, I wondered how much of our dysfunctional family dynamic had been hidden from Heather, as well as enabled by her. How much had our parents sheltered her not just from consequences, but from awareness? It's not stupid if that's what they led you to believe, I said carefully, but it's also not sustainable. I'm starting to realize that. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a nervous habit from childhood that made her suddenly seem younger, more vulnerable. If Dad really takes out a second mortgage, that would be my fault, wouldn't it? The question hung between us, freighted with an unfamiliar weight, responsibility. It would be his choice, I said after a moment. But yes, it would be because of your situation. She nodded slowly, absorbing this. I don't want that. I don't want them risking their retirement for me. Not anymore. Then tell them that, I urged. Tell them you've made other arrangements, that you're handling it yourself. They won't listen. They'll insist on helping. Then you need to set boundaries with them, just like I've had to do. She gave me a skeptical look. You make it sound so easy. It's not easy, I admitted. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's necessary for all of us. We talked for another 20 minutes, mapping out a strategy for how Heather could approach our parents about backing off from the wellness center finances. For the first time in our adult lives, it felt like we were on the same side rather than competing for resources and attention. As we were about to sign off, Heather cleared her throat. I do want to make this business work, you know. I'm not just saying that to get the money. I believe you, I said, realizing it was true. And I want you to succeed. Just on your own terms, not because Mom and Dad pulled strings or bailed you out. Thanks, Morgan, for the loan, but also for not giving up on me completely. After we disconnected, I sat staring at my dark computer screen, emotions swirling. Had that conversation really happened? Had Heather and I actually connected as adults, acknowledging the twisted dynamics that had shaped both our lives? I called Mason, needing to process with someone who hadn't been raised in the funhouse mirror. Of my family's reality? She actually took responsibility, I told him, still sounding bewildered. Not completely, but it's a start. People can surprise you, he said. Sometimes they just need the space to be better than they've been. Space, I repeated, turning, the word over in my mind. That's exactly it. By refusing to participate in the old patterns, I gave her space to try something new. The next morning, I received an email from Heather with her business plan attached. It was surprisingly detailed. Market analysis, competitive landscape, financial projections. Not professional quality, but thoughtful, substantial. Evidence of actual effort rather than wishful thinking. I forwarded it to my friend Tara, who worked in small business development. Any chance you'd look this over and give me your honest assessment? It's my sister's wellness center plan, considering giving her a loan. Tara's response came a few hours later. Not bad, actually. Ambitious, but not completely unrealistic. Revenue projections are optimistic, but not totally fantasy land. She's identified a viable market niche. I'd suggest some revisions to the operational budget and marketing strategy, but there's a real business concept here. I felt a strange surge of pride. My little sister had created something substantive, something that an objective professional thought had merit. I sent Tara's feedback to Heather, along with a note, solid start. My friend has some suggestions that could strengthen the plan. Let me know if you'd like to discuss, Heather replied within minutes. Yes, would love any input. This is all new to me. The humility in her response was so unlike the Heather, I knew that I read the message twice to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. That night, I finalized the loan agreement and emailed it to Heather for review. The money would be transferred in 2 installments, $50,000 immediately to pay the contractors and prevent them from walking off the job, and $50,000 after she implemented the revisions to her business plan that Tara had suggested. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. But something made me answer. Hello? Morgan. Her voice was tight. Your sister tells me you two have worked out some kind of loan arrangement. That's right, without consulting us. It's between Heather and me, Mom. It doesn't involve you or Dad. She made a sound of frustration. Of course it involves us. We're her parents. We're your parents. And we're adults, I pointed out, capable of making our own financial decisions. She says you're only giving her half the money up front. That's not going to be enough to— It's enough to pay the contractors and keep them on the job, I interrupted. The second half comes after she revises her business plan based on professional feedback. Professional feedback? What does that mean? Are you questioning her vision? I closed my eyes, counting silently to 5. I'm treating this as a business transaction, Mom, because that's what it is. If Heather were getting this loan from a bank, they'd require much more than I'm asking. But you're not a bank, you're her sister. Yes, and as her sister, I want her to succeed. That means making sure she has a solid plan before investing more money. My mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had that dangerous softness that always preceded her most cutting remarks. I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would be so cold, so unfeeling. After everything we've done for you. Stop, I said, firmly. Just stop. I'm not doing this again. Doing what? Letting you make me feel guilty for having boundaries. The loan terms are fair. More than fair. Heather agrees. That's all that matters. Your father is very disappointed. Good night, Mom, I said, and hung up. I expected to feel guilty, but instead, I felt strangely peaceful. Each time I enforced a boundary, it got a little easier. Each time I refused to be manipulated, the old patterns lost a little more of their power over me. My phone buzzed with a text from Heather. Mom called you, didn't she? Sorry about that. I told her to leave it alone. I replied, not your fault. Some patterns take time to break. Her response surprised me again. Working on it. Signed the loan agreement. Thank you for believing in me enough to be honest instead of just giving me what I asked for. I read her message 3 times, a smile slowly spreading across my face. Maybe, just maybe, something good was emerging from this inheritance saga. Not just financial security for me, but a chance for both Heather and me to rewrite our family's dysfunctional script. For the first time, I felt genuinely grateful for Grandpa Walt's decision. He hadn't just left me money, he'd created an opportunity for growth that none of us could have anticipated. 3 weeks after our video call, I flew back to Ohio. Not for another family confrontation, but for a much more positive reason, to tour potential locations for my new home in Seattle. The inheritance money had been officially transferred to my account the previous week, a surreal moment that had me staring at my banking app in disbelief. I'd immediately moved most of it into the investment accounts my financial advisor had recommended, keeping out just enough for a substantial down payment on a house. Mason had offered to come with me on the house hunting trip, but I'd declined. This is something I need to do myself, I'd told him. But I value your opinion. I'll FaceTime you from the properties I like best. What I didn't tell him was that I'd also arranged to meet with Heather during this trip. The first installment of the loan had been transferred. The contractors were back on the job at the wellness center, and she'd been sending me regular updates on the renovation progress. Our text exchanges had been cordial, sometimes even warm, a dramatic shift from our previous dynamic. But texts were one thing, face-to-face was another matter entirely. We'd agreed to meet at a neutral location, neither her place nor our parents' house. Heather suggested a new cafe that had opened downtown, well away from the Copper Kettle and its memories of our last family confrontation. As my rideshare pulled up to Sage and Honey Cafe, I spotted her through the window, already, seated at a table near the back. She was early, a first in my memory. Heather had spent her entire life making grand, fashionably late entrances. "I ordered you a chai latte," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "You still like those, right?" I nodded, touched by the small gesture of consideration. "Thanks. How have you been?" "Busy. Good busy, though." She pulled out her phone and showed me photos of the wellness center renovations. Sleek white walls, warm wood accents, large windows that flooded the space with natural light. "The contractor says we're on schedule to open in 6 weeks. It looks amazing," I said, genuinely impressed. "Really professional. Thanks." She put her phone down, fidgeting slightly with her napkin. "I've been implementing those changes your friend suggested for the business plan. The revised marketing strategy is actually saving me money, which I didn't expect. Tara knows her stuff. I'm glad it's helping." An awkward silence fell between us. Years of strained communication and competition couldn't be erased by a few weeks of cordial texts. "So," Heather finally said, "you're looking at houses in Seattle?" "Yes. I have appointments with a realtor tomorrow morning. 3 properties that look promising." "That's great. I'm happy for you." She hesitated, then added, "I mean that. Really." I studied her face, searching for the familiar signs of envy or resentment, but found none. "Thank you. That means a lot." "Have you talked to Mom and Dad since, you know?" I shook my head. "Not really. Mom texted to ask about my flight details, but I didn't respond. I'm not ready for another confrontation." "They're still pretty upset," Heather admitted. "Dad especially. He keeps saying you've turned your back on the family." The old guilt threatened to surface, but I pushed it away. "I haven't turned my back on anyone. I've just stopped letting them dictate my choices." "I know." I tried explaining that to them, but she shrugged helplessly. "They don't get it. They think I should be angrier at you than I am." That surprised me. "And why aren't you? Angry, I mean." She was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I was at first, really angry, but then I started thinking about what you said, about consequences and safety nets and all that, and about what Grandpa Walt wrote in his letter to you." "You read it?" I asked, startled. "No, but you mentioned what he said. About me needing to learn the world doesn't owe me anything." She gave a rueful smile. That hurt, a lot. But he wasn't wrong. I didn't know how to respond. This level of self-awareness from Heather was unprecedented. "The thing is," she continued, "I've been coasting for years, jumping from one thing to the next, knowing Mom and Dad would clean up my messes. It was easier than actually committing to something and risking failure. And now? Now I'm scared out of my mind," she admitted, with a shaky laugh. "This wellness center, it's all on me. If it fails, I've got a significant loan to repay and no one to bail me out. That's how most people operate all the time," I pointed out gently. "I know. I'm finally growing up, at 35. Pathetic, right?" "Not pathetic," I said. "Just overdue." She laughed, a genuine sound without the brittle edge I was accustomed to hearing. "Fair enough. The funny thing is, being scared is actually motivating. I'm working harder than I ever have, making lists, researching pricing strategies, interviewing potential staff." "That's great, Heather. It's your fault, you know." Her tone was light, almost teasing. "If you'd just handed over the money like everyone expected, I'd probably still be the same entitled brat I've always been." I smiled at the self-deprecation. "Happy to help, I guess." "I do have one favor to ask, though." She looked suddenly nervous. "The wellness center opening is in 6 weeks. Would you consider coming? Not for Mom and Dad. They might not even be there if they're still upset. But for me, As my sister. The invitation caught me off guard. Heather had never explicitly sought my presence at any of her milestones before. She'd always assumed I'd be there, in the background, fulfilling my familial duty. "I'd like that," I said before I could overthink it. "I'll make it work with my schedule." Her smile was pure relief. "Thank you." We spent another hour at the cafe talking more freely than we had in years. She asked about my marketing consultancy plans, listened attentively when I explained my vision for supporting small, ethical businesses. I inquired about her certification process, the classes she planned to offer at the wellness center. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old patterns threatening to resurface. But there was also something new. A tentative respect, a cautious optimism that perhaps we could forge a relationship based on who we actually were rather than the roles we'd been assigned. As we parted outside the cafe, Heather surprised me with a hug. "I never thanked you," she said. "For the loan? For not giving me what I demanded." She pulled back, her expression serious. "And for not giving up on me entirely. You could have cut ties completely. No one would have blamed you." "You're my sister," I said simply. "That doesn't change, even when everything else does." That evening, I checked into my hotel rather than staying with family as I would have in the past. As I was unpacking, my phone rang. Dad. My hand hovered over the screen for several seconds before I answered. "Hello?" "Morgan." His voice was stiff, formal. "Your mother tells me you're in town. Just for a couple of days. I'm house hunting in Seattle." "With the inheritance money." I closed my eyes briefly. "Yes, Dad, with my inheritance money." He was silent for a moment. "Heather says the two of you met today." "We did. She seems to think you've done her some kind of favor by, what was it she said? Making me stand on my own 2 feet for once." The hint of bewilderment in his voice almost made me laugh. The idea that teaching Heather independence could be beneficial clearly hadn't occurred to him. "I think she's rising to the challenge admirably," I said carefully. "This wellness center is important to her. If it fails because you wouldn't provide adequate funding, if it fails, it won't be because of the loan amount," I interrupted. "And failure isn't the worst thing that could happen to Heather. Learning from failure might be the best thing." He made a dismissive noise. "That's easy for you to say from your position of financial security." "A position I earned," I reminded him, "through hard work and responsible choices. And a substantial inheritance that you refused to share with your sister." We were talking in circles. The same accusations, the same guilt trips, the same fundamental disagreement about family obligation. "Dad, I'm not going to have this argument. Again. I've made my decision. Heather has accepted it. Maybe it's time you did too. Your mother is very hurt that you haven't come to see us." The abrupt change of topic, another classic maneuver. When logical arguments failed, resort to emotional manipulation. "I've been busy," I said neutrally, "and I wasn't sure I'd be welcome given how things were left." "You're always welcome in your parents' home," he said, though his tone conveyed the opposite. "Regardless of how disappointed we might be in your choices." I recognized the olive branch for what it was. Conditional acceptance predicated on my acknowledgement of wrongdoing. In the past, I would have grasped at it eagerly, apologizing for standing my ground, grateful for any crumb of parental approval. Not anymore. "I appreciate that, Dad, but I think we all need some time and space. This trip is focused on house hunting. Maybe next time I'm in town we can have dinner." His silence spoke volumes. I hadn't rejected the olive branch outright, but I hadn't embraced it either. I'd acknowledged it and set my own terms, a subtle but significant shift in our dynamic. "Your mother will be disappointed," he said finally. "I know, I'm sorry about that. Tell her I'll call soon." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, processing the conversation. There had been no shouting, no dramatic accusations, no tears. Just two adults with fundamentally different perspectives, neither willing to concede ground. It wasn't resolution, but it was something. A new configuration of our relationship that acknowledged the change in me without trying to erase it. The next morning, I met with the realtor, touring 3 beautiful homes in vibrant Seattle neighborhoods. The third property, a craftsman bungalow with a sun-drenched kitchen and a backyard perfect for the garden I'd always wanted, felt right immediately. Standing in the empty living room with its built-in bookshelves and bay window, I could envision my future taking shape. "I want to make an offer," I told the realtor. As she prepared the paperwork, I took out my phone and snapped a few photos. I sent one to Mason with the caption, "Think this might be the one. What do you think?" Then, after a moment's hesitation, I sent the same photo to Heather with a different message. "About to make an offer on my first house. Wish me luck." Her reply came almost immediately. "It's beautiful. Good luck. Can't wait to visit someday." I smiled at her response, not jealous, not resentful, just supportive. Maybe there was hope for us after all. As I signed the initial offer documents, I felt Grandpa Walt's presence almost tangibly, as if he were standing beside me, nodding in approval. His gift had set in motion changes I could never have imagined. Not just financial security, but a fundamental reshaping of my family relationships and my sense of self. Whatever happened next, I knew I wouldn't be going back to the person I was before, the eternal accommodator, the reliable backup, the one who never made waves. That version of Morgan Reynolds had served her purpose, but her time was over. The woman signing a contract for her dream home, setting boundaries with her parents, and building a healthier relationship with her sister. That was who I was becoming. And I couldn't wait to discover who she might turn out to be. 6 weeks later, I found myself once again on a plane to Ohio. This time, the trip had a dual purpose: attending Heather's wellness center opening and closing on my new Seattle home, remotely. The timing had worked out perfectly, or cosmically, as Heather might say with her newfound spirituality. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 major milestones, both direct results of Grandpa Walt's inheritance, occurring on the same day. One representing my sister's first serious attempt at independence, the other symbolizing my own new chapter. Mason had offered to come with me this time, and I'd accepted. Having him by my side felt right. A physical reminder of the life I was building, separate from the entanglements of my family history. "Nervous?" he asked as our plane began its descent into Cincinnati. "A little," I admitted. "It's been weeks since I've spoken to my parents, and Heather says they'll be at the opening." "You don't have to engage if you don't want to," he reminded me. "We're there to support Heather, not to rehash old arguments." I squeezed his hand gratefully. "I know. I just hope they can keep the focus on her achievement, not our disagreement." We checked into our hotel, another boundary I was maintaining. No more staying with family, and spent the evening going over the remote closing documents for my Seattle home. The seller had accepted my offer, the inspection had gone smoothly, and now all that remained was signing the final paperwork. "Homeowner," Mason said, smiling as I completed the last electronic signature. "How does it feel?" I leaned back against the hotel headboard, trying to identify the swirl of emotions. Surreal, wonderful, terrifying. All appropriate reactions to adulting at this level, he assured me, pulling me into a hug. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Good weather for a wellness center opening. Heather had been texting me updates all week, the final interior touches, the professional photo shoot for promotional materials, the local press who'd agreed to cover the opening. Her excitement was palpable even through text, and I found myself genuinely happy for her. This wasn't the flighty enthusiasm she'd shown for previous ventures. This had weight to it, substance. She'd put in the work, faced setbacks, made difficult decisions. Whether the business ultimately succeeded or failed, she'd grown in the process. The Tranquility Haven Wellness Center was located in a renovated Victorian house on the edge of downtown, close enough to be accessible but removed enough to create a sense of retreat. As Mason and I approached, I was struck by the transformation. The formerly neglected building now gleamed with fresh paint in soothing sage green, the landscaping tasteful and inviting. A small crowd had already gathered in the front garden, where Heather stood in a flowing white dress, greeting guests with a confidence that seemed more grounded than her usual theatrical charm. She spotted us immediately and waved, excusing herself from her conversation to hurry over. "You came," she said, embracing me tightly. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss it." She turned to Mason, extending her hand. "And you must be Mason. I'm Heather. Thank you for coming, and for being such a support to my sister." I raised an eyebrow at her unusually gracious introduction. The old Heather would have given him a dismissive once-over, or worse, attempted to flirt. "Congratulations on the opening," Mason said, gesturing to the beautifully renovated building. "The place looks incredible." "Thank you. Would you like a tour before the official ribbon cutting? I can introduce you to some of the instructors." As she led us through the space, I was genuinely impressed by what she'd accomplished. The interior was a perfect balance of luxury and accessibility, not pretentious, but special enough to justify the premium pricing. She'd created private treatment rooms, a airy yoga studio, a meditation garden, and a small retail area featuring carefully curated products. "The loan covered all of this?" I asked, surprised by the extent of the renovation. "The loan, plus some creative solutions," she explained. "I bartered services with local artisans, social media marketing for them in exchange for custom furniture pieces, and I found ways to trim costs without compromising quality." "Smart," I said, and meant, "It." "I had good advice," she replied, giving me a meaningful look. As we completed the tour, I spotted my parents entering the main reception area. My mother, immaculately dressed as always, scanning the room with the practiced eye of someone assessing the social landscape. My father, slightly behind her, his expression a careful neutral. "Mom and Dad are here," I murmured to Heather. She followed my gaze and nodded. "They confirmed yesterday. I asked them to be civil." She hesitated, then added, "They're proud of what I've done here, but they're still upset about the inheritance situation. Just be prepared." Mason squeezed my hand as my parents approached. My mother embraced Heather first, a lingering hug that conveyed both pride and possession. My father kissed her cheek with a murmured, "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Then they turned. To me, the shift in their expressions subtle but unmistakable. Cooler, more reserved. "Morgan," my mother said, offering a brief hug that barely made contact. "Good to see you?" "You too, Mom," I replied, maintaining the polite fiction that this was a normal family gathering. "The place looks amazing, doesn't it?" "Heather has always had an eye for aesthetic," she agreed, neatly sidestepping any acknowledgement of the business acumen or hard work that had gone into the project. "And you must be Mason," my father said, extending a hand to my boyfriend. "We've heard about you." The slight emphasis on "about" conveyed volumes. They'd heard I was under his influence, that he'd encouraged my rebellion. I bit back a defensive response. This was Heather's day, not the time for family drama. "Pleasure to meet you both," Mason said smoothly. Morgan speaks of her family often, a diplomatic non-statement that couldn't possibly offend. I suppressed, a smile at his tact. "If you'll excuse me," Heather interjected, "I need to get ready for the ribbon cutting. Mom, Dad, I've reserved seats for you in the front row." As they moved away, following Heather, Mason leaned close to my ear. "Wow, I see what you mean about the family dynamics." "That was actually civil by our standards," I murmured back. No passive-aggressive comments about my life choices or pointed questions about when I'll come to my senses. "The day is young," he replied with a wry smile. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was brief but lovely. Heather gave a short speech about her vision for the wellness center, creating a space where stressed professionals could find balance, where wellness wasn't just a luxury, but a necessary part of a sustainable life. She thanked her team, the contractors, the local businesses who'd partnered with her, and then to my absolute shock, she thanked me. "Finally, I want to thank my sister Morgan," she said, finding me in the crowd. Without her belief in me, and her insistence that I stand on my own feet, Tranquility Haven might never have become what it is today. Sometimes the people who push us to be better aren't the ones who make things easier, but the ones who challenge us to rise to the occasion. A ripple of appreciative murmurs and applause spread through the gathered guests. My mother's face was a study in conflicted emotions, pride in Heather's poise undermined by confusion at this public acknowledgement of my role. My father simply looked uncomfortable. I felt a lump form in my throat. Heather's words weren't just kind, they were transformative. She had reframed our conflict not as a betrayal, but as a catalyst for growth. In doing so, she'd given our parents, and everyone else present, a new way to understand what had happened between us. After the ceremony, guests mingled in the main reception area, sampling herbal teas and signing up for introductory sessions. Mason was deep in conversation with one of the yoga instructors about the benefits of different practices for stress relief. I was examining the retail display when my mother appeared at my elbow. "That was quite a shout-out Heather gave you," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "It was unexpected," I admitted. "She seems different, more focused." I nodded, not trusting myself to elaborate without saying something that might rekindle our conflict. My mother fingered a rose quartz crystal on the display, not meeting my eyes. "Your father and I have been talking about everything that's happened." I braced myself for another guilt trip, another demand that I apologize for asserting. "My independence. We may have been—" She hesitated, the words clearly difficult for her. "Somewhat unreasonable in our expectations." I stared at her, stunned. This was as close to an admission of fault as I'd ever heard from either of my parents. Seeing what Heather has accomplished, here, largely on her own, she continued, it's made us reconsider some things. "Like what?" I asked cautiously. "Like whether we've been helping her or enabling her." She glanced across the room to where Heather was confidently guiding a small group of potential clients through the meditation garden. "She's different now, more like you in some ways." I wasn't sure how to respond to that. My mother had never compared me to Heather in a way that framed my traits as desirable. "The house you bought?" she said, changing the subject abruptly. "Your father mentioned you were closing on it today." "Yes, all signed and official as of this morning." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "Perhaps when you're settled, your father and I might visit sometime. See this new life you're building." The invitation, tentative as it was, caught me completely off guard. This wasn't forgiveness exactly, nor was it a full acknowledgement of their role in our dysfunctional family dynamic. But it was an opening, a small crack in the wall of disapproval they'd constructed. "I'd like that," I said carefully. "Once I'm settled in." Something in her posture relaxed slightly. "Good. That's good." Before the conversation could continue, Heather called for everyone's attention to introduce a special demonstration of sound bath meditation in the yoga studio. As the guests migrated toward the back of the building, I found myself walking beside my father. "Morgan," he said, his voice gruff. "Your sister mentioned you helped review her business plan, offered some suggestions. My friend Tara did most of the heavy lifting. She works in small business development." He nodded thoughtfully. "The plan is solid, better than anything Heather's put together before. Coming from my father, a retired business consultant who'd never been shy about criticizing my career choices. This was significant praise. She did the work, I said. I just connected her with the right resources. Still. He cleared his throat. It was good of you. After everything. We'd reached the yoga studio, where cushions had been arranged in concentric circles around a collection of crystal singing bowls. The conversation couldn't go further, but as we took our seats, I felt a subtle shift in the air between us. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. It was a beginning. As the gentle tones of the singing bowls filled the room, I closed my eyes and allowed myself to simply be present. In this moment, I wasn't defined by old family roles or recent conflicts. I was just Morgan, sister, girlfriend, new homeowner, emerging entrepreneur, sitting in a beautiful space created partly through my boundaries and partly through my sister's newfound determination. Whatever came next for our family, nothing could erase this achievement. We had both grown in ways that would have been impossible without the catalyst of Grandpa Walt's final gift. 1 year later, I stood in my backyard garden, watching the late afternoon sunlight filter through the Japanese maple I'd planted to commemorate my first anniversary as a homeowner. The Seattle spring had been unusually generous, and my carefully tended vegetable beds were already showing promising growth, much like the other elements of my new life. My marketing consultancy, Reynolds Purpose Partners, had grown from a side project to a thriving business with 3 part-time employees and a roster of clients I genuinely believed in: small, eco-friendly companies, local nonprofits, women-owned startups. I'd converted the bungalow's sunroom into a home office, a light-filled space where creativity flowed easily. Mason and I had settled into a comfortable routine, splitting our time between his downtown apartment and my cozy house. We weren't rushing toward next steps, content to let our relationship develop organically. But there was a quiet understanding between us that we were building something lasting. The inheritance that had caused such upheaval had now been fully integrated into my life, invested wisely, used purposefully, no longer a point of contention, but simply a foundation for the future I was creating. My phone buzzed with an incoming FaceTime call. Heather's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," I answered, settling onto the garden bench. "How's it going?" Her face appeared, slightly flushed with excitement. "You will not believe what just happened." "Tell me," I said, smiling at her enthusiasm. Seattle Wellness Monthly wants to feature Tranquility Haven in their Destination Wellness issue. The editor was in Ohio visiting family, came in for a treatment, and loved everything about the place. "Heather, that's fantastic. National exposure could bring in clients from all over." "I know, and the timing couldn't be better. We just broke even last month, a full quarter ahead of the projections in my business plan." Pride swelled in my chest. She'd done it, built a sustainable business, fulfilled her loan obligations, never missing a payment, and established herself as a respected name in the wellness community. "I'm so proud of you," I told her. "You've really made this work." Her expression softened. "I couldn't have done it without you." "That's not true. You did the work." "Yes, but you gave me the push I needed, and the structure." She laughed. Who knew I'd actually thrive with boundaries and accountability? The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The loan that had initially seemed like a punishment, a withholding of what she felt entitled to, had actually been the framework that allowed her to succeed. "How are Mom and Dad taking your success?" I asked. Her expression turned thoughtful. "It's been interesting. They're proud, of course, but I think they're still adjusting to this new dynamic where I don't need to be rescued. Dad keeps offering business advice I didn't ask for. Mom still struggles not to take over when she visits the center." "Old habits," I said. "Exactly. But I'm getting better at redirecting them, setting boundaries, as you would say." She grinned. "Speaking of which, are you ready for the visit next week?" I glanced around my garden, mentally adding it to the long list of preparations for my parents' first trip to Seattle. As ready as I'll ever be. The guest room is all set up. I've planned some sightseeing itineraries. Mason's coming over for dinner the first night. They'll behave, Heather assured me. Mom promised. Dad grumbled but agreed. The upcoming visit represented a significant milestone in our evolving family dynamic. After months of cautious text exchanges and increasingly cordial phone calls, my parents had finally accepted my invitation to see my new home. It hadn't been a straight path. To this point, there had been setbacks. A particularly tense Thanksgiving, where my father had made pointed comments about family loyalty, and a Christmas card from my mother that had included a passive-aggressive note about hoping I was enjoying my independence. But there had also been progress. My father calling to ask my advice about retirement investments, my mother sending a surprisingly thoughtful housewarming gift. I hope you're right, I said. I'd like them to see that I'm building something meaningful here, that the inheritance wasn't wasted. They'll see it, Heather said with unusual firmness, and if they don't, that's their loss. Her defense of me, something that would have been unimaginable a year ago, still took me by surprise sometimes. How are things with Mason? She asked, changing the subject. Good. Really good, actually. I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. He's been dropping hints about looking for a place together when his lease is up in August. That's a big step. How do you feel about it? Ready, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. It feels right. I'm happy for you, Morgan. You deserve someone who sees you. The simple acknowledgement that I deserve to be seen, to be valued for who I was, hit me with unexpected force. For so much of my life I'd been overlooked, taken for granted, appreciated only for what I could provide rather than who I was. Thanks, Heather, I said, a little choked up. That means a lot. After we ended the call, I sat in the garden a while longer, reflecting on how much had changed in the span of a year. The inheritance had been a catalyst, yes, but the transformation went deeper than finances. It was about finally claiming my worth, establishing boundaries, refusing to be defined by others' expectations. And remarkably, those changes had created space for Heather to grow as well. By refusing to enable her dependence, I'd actually contributed to her independence. Our relationship now was more balanced, more honest, still evolving, still occasionally tense, but grounded in mutual respect rather than competition or resentment. My parents were the slowest to adapt, but even they were beginning to accept this new reality. They might never fully understand or approve of my choices, but they were learning to respect them, if only because I'd given them no other option. The next morning, I woke early to the sound of spring rain tapping gently against my bedroom window. I had a full day ahead, client meetings, final preparations for my parents' visit, dinner with Mason to strategize about their arrival. But before diving into my to-do list, I took out the letter Grandpa Walt had written me, now carefully, preserved in an acid-free sleeve. I didn't need to unfold it. I knew the words by heart. Still, there was comfort in holding this tangible connection to him, this proof that someone had seen me clearly long before I learned to see myself. Use it to build the life you want, not the one they think you should have. I had done exactly that. The inheritance had given me financial freedom, yes, but the real gift had been permission to prioritize my own needs, to imagine a life shaped by my desires rather than others' expectations. As I made coffee in my sun-drenched kitchen, my phone pinged with an email notification. Mr. Donovan, Grandpa Walt's attorney. Curious, I opened it immediately. Dear Morgan, I hope this message finds you well. As we approach the 1-year anniversary of your grandfather's passing, I wanted to share something he asked me to hold back until this time. Walter left a video message for you, with instructions that it be delivered 1 year after his will was executed. I've attached the file to this email. He was quite specific that this was for your eyes only. Warm regards, Thomas Donovan. My hand trembled slightly as I downloaded the attachment. A video message? Grandpa Walt had never been comfortable with technology. The idea that he'd recorded something for me to see after he was gone felt both wonderful and painful. I settled at my kitchen table, took a deep breath, and pressed play. Grandpa Walt's face filled my screen. He looked tired, the illness already taking its toll, but his eyes, those perceptive eyes that had always seen more than others, were clear and focused. "Morgan," he began, his voice raspier than I remembered, but still warm with affection. "If you're watching this, then a year has passed since I left you my estate, and knowing our family, I imagine it's been quite a year." I laughed despite the tears already forming, struck by his prescience. "I want you to know that leaving everything to you wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision or a way to cause trouble, though I suspect that's what your parents think. It was a deliberate choice based on watching you your entire life. How you've handled challenges, how you've carried more than your share of the family burden, how you've never asked for recognition or reward." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "But it was also a risk. Money changes things, Morgan. It changes relationships. It changes how people see you and how they behave toward you. I knew that leaving you this inheritance might cause conflict, might force some difficult conversations that have been avoided for too long." I wiped away tears, astonished at how accurately he had predicted the fallout. "My hope was that it would also give you something you've never had. The power to choose your own path without consideration for anyone else's expectations. The freedom to build boundaries. The resources to create the life you want, not the one others have designed for you." He leaned closer to the camera, his expression intent. "So this is my question, 1 year later. Has it been worth it? Has the freedom outweighed the conflict? Have you begun to build that life that's truly yours?" He paused, as if actually waiting for my answer. "I hope so, kiddo. Because you deserve that freedom. You deserve to be more than the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who always compromises. You deserve to be seen and valued just as you are." Fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. Even now, a year after his death, Grandpa Walt was still the one person who truly saw me. Whatever has happened this past year, whether your family has accepted your decisions or fought you every step of the way, remember this: the money was just a tool. The real inheritance I wanted to leave you was permission to put yourself first. To believe that your dreams and needs matter just as much as anyone else's." He smiled. That crooked, warm smile I missed every day. "I'm proud of you, Morgan. I always have been. Not for what you achieve or what you provide to others, but for who you are. Your integrity, your compassion, your quiet strength. Don't let anyone dim that light. Ever." The video ended, freezing on his smile. I sat in my kitchen, tears flowing freely, filled with a bittersweet mixture of grief and gratitude. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that every difficult conversation, every painful confrontation, every moment of doubt had been worth it. The inheritance had cost me the comfortable illusion of family harmony, but it had given me something far more valuable: truth. The truth about my family dynamics, about my own worth, about what I needed to be happy. I replayed the video once more, savoring this unexpected gift, this final affirmation from the one person who had always believed in me. Then I wiped my tears, finished my coffee, and turned to face the day ahead. Not as Morgan the Reliable, not as the overlooked daughter or the designated peacekeeper, but simply as Morgan Reynolds, building a life that was authentically, unapologetically mine. My name is Morgan Reynolds, and from wherever you're watching this video, remember, when someone asks you to compromise your worth for their comfort, it's not about family needs. It's about showing you exactly where you've always stood in their eyes. The moment you recognize that truth is the moment you can begin to build a life that honors who you truly are, not just what others need you to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.